Now, just over 6 years since the Grenfell Tower disaster, councils and fire and rescue services in Wales are unable to ensure buildings are safe. That's according to the Welsh spending watchdog, Audit Wales, which says it's unclear how Wales will enforce new building regulations drawn up to avoid another devastating tower block blaze. It says council-run building control services, staffed by an ageing workforce, will struggle to cope. Janet Finch-Saunders is a Conservative Senedd member and the Shadow Minister for Climate and Housing for the party in Cardiff Bay. Bore da, good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. What do you make of this report?
Well, having read the report, it's very clear to me that the building safety regime is broken in Wales. And this comes at a time when we have thousands of victims living in properties that are unsafe, with the cladding scandal. Those responsible for implementing changes to building control and building safety, according to the report, are simply not well placed to deliver them. And what's even more worrying is that some local authorities' current practices have been deemed potentially unlawful.
Yeah, so this is really about the council's workforce, the council's ability to discharge its duties, and it's raising some serious concerns here.
It is, and we know that our planning departments, we have 120 or so less planning officers in Wales than what we actually need, hence why house building is much delayed. And it's actually now, the focus now after this report, we've been calling on Welsh Government to actually bring their regime in line with the UK government's, but trying to be different, of course, is causing the delays. And, they too often they want to divert policy that is different for England. And they just don't have the building control officers in place. And too often, even in my own constituency, where people believe that building control conditions are being breached and things, there's very little in terms of enforcement. The council just turn around and say, we haven't got the resources. So it is really worrying when, this report highlights that some local authorities' current practices are potentially unlawful, and that what we've seen today now, that the crisis in building control is far wider and deeper rooted than feared.
Yeah, we've just heard about...
Really, this comes down to the Minister for Climate Change, who has repeatedly failed to get a grip on building safety in Wales. And one of the reasons, that again is diverging from the UK government in Wales, is having a detrimental impact. We need to have strict building control and regulations in place that actually, guarantee that we will not see, the terrible disaster that happened in Grenfell.
Yeah, I mean, as you've already mentioned, this does seem at least partly to be a resource issue. I mean, we've just heard about the lack of resource with eye care. We could bring up any sort of representative from any sort of public service and they'd probably say that resourcing is an issue. And so people will turn to the Conservative government in Westminster, where, the majority of the Welsh Government's budget comes from, and say there needs to be more funding for this kind of thing, otherwise there are going to be gaps.
Well, that's actually not quite correct in terms of, for every £1 that they spend on public services in England, the UK government provide the Welsh government with £1.20.
And there are greater needs in terms of public services because of an ageing demographic and a sicker population, for example.
Yeah, but James, at the end of the day, of the 120 opposed to the £1 spent in England, they actually only spend £1.09. So they're not actually spending the amount of money that they're getting from the UK government on the things we really need: social care, health, building control, planning, you name it, transport, you name it. Wales is actually falling behind now, and they constantly blame the UK government. And yet we're better funded, actually, than they are in England. So if they can make it work, the UK government...
well, can they? I mean, there'll be plenty of public services in England making the same complaints in terms of resourcing as well.
Well, we don't, at the end of the day, we as politicians here in Wales, we see it highlighted day after day after day. My constituents who come into me, on issues such as building control, the council has no money to enforce anything. So basically, in planning terms, conditions are often breached, building control, as we've said here, quite sometimes unlawful. It's actually another disaster, and this disaster is the making of the Welsh Government.
Thank you so much for joining.
Read the report. The report is very, very clear.
Yeah, that report is available online, and of course coverage on the BBC Wales News website of that Audit Wales report. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Janet Finch-Saunders from the Welsh Conservatives. We did ask the Welsh Government Minister responsible, Julie James, to speak to us this morning, but she wasn't available. We've had a statement from the Welsh Government saying that the reforming of the current system of building control is a priority for them. The lead on Welsh councils, the Welsh Local Government Association, declined